I'm just going to talk this out. It's easier than typing. My hands still shake a little when I think about it too hard anyway. This was 5 years ago? 6? God, time blurs. It was Thanksgiving weekend, but not Thanksgiving itself. The Saturday after. My girlfriend at the time, Chloe, and I were driving back from her cousin's place upstate. It was one of those obligatory family things that ran way longer than anyone wanted. We were both exhausted, and we'd had a couple of beers hours earlier, just with dinner. We were fine to drive, just tired, so tired. The drive was about 40 minutes of back roads to get back to our apartment. It was late, maybe 1 in the morning, the kind of late where the world feels empty and yours alone. It was freezing that night, a real bone-deep cold, and there was this thin layer of frost on everything, making the road look like it was made of dark glass. I had the heat blasting and some podcasts playing low, just to keep my brain engaged. Chloe was conked out in the passenger seat, her head against the window. We were maybe halfway home, on this long, straight stretch of road bordered by nothing but skeletal trees and the occasional mailbox, when I saw him. 1 second, the high beams were cutting through empty blackness. The next, there was a man standing in the middle of my lane. He wasn't walking. He wasn't looking around. He was just standing there, facing us, perfectly centered. My body reacted before my mind could. I slammed the brakes. The tires hissed on the frost. In that frozen second of skidding, the headlights lit him up completely. He was wearing jeans and a dark hoodie, but no coat. His hands were at his sides, and in his right hand, he was holding a hatchet. Not a big woodsman's axe, but a small, sharp hatchet, the kind you'd use to split kindling. The blade caught the light. His face, he wasn't angry. He wasn't screaming. He looked utterly blank. Just empty. Like a shop window dummy someone had propped up in the road, but his eyes were open and they were fixed right on me. I yanked the wheel hard to the left to swerve around him. As the car slewed sideways, I saw him move. He didn't jump away. He lunged toward the car, swinging the hatchet in a short, brutal arc. I heard it, a sickening thunk crack, like someone hitting a tree stump. He'd hit the car, the passenger side. The swerve, the ice, the panic, it was too much. The car spun. For a few seconds, it was just a dizzying whirl of black trees and the yellow lines of the road cartwheeling in the windshield. Chloe woke up screaming. We spun a full 270 degrees and slid backwards into the shallow ditch on the opposite side of the road, the rear bumper crunching softly into the frozen weeds. The engine stalled. Silence, except for Chloe's hyperventilating and the ticking of the cooling engine. Then I looked up. Because we'd spun, we were now facing the way we'd come. My headlights were pointing back down the road, illuminating the scene like a spotlight on a stage. He was still there, about 50 feet away. He'd taken a few stumbling steps after his swing, but now he'd stopped. He turned slowly, methodically, to face us again. The hatchet was still in his hand, hanging by his thigh, and he started walking toward the car. Not running, walking. A slow, deliberate, plodding walk, directly toward my driver's side window. Chloe was clawing at my arm. Go, go, go! But the car was stalled. I turned the key. The engine groaned, coughed, but didn't catch. I tried again. Nothing but a tired whine. He was 30 feet away, 20. On the third try, the engine roared to life. I threw it into drive and stomped on the gas. The wheels spun, caught on gravel, and the car lurched forward, back onto the road. I thought we were clear. I thought, just drive, don't look back. I looked in the rearview mirror. He wasn't giving up. He was running now, a loping, uneven sprint. The hatchet held out to his side, and he was fast, unnaturally fast for someone who'd just been standing like a statue. Before I could even process how he'd closed the distance, he was at the driver's side. I heard a scraping metal shriek. He'd swung the hatchet and hooked it onto the roof of the car, above my door. I saw his fingers, white-knuckled, grip the edge of the roof through my window. He was trying to pull himself onto the car, while I was doing 40 miles an hour down an icy road. Chloe was shrieking. I was just screaming, wordless, primal terror. I swerved violently left, then right, trying to shake him loose. I could see his face, right outside my window, inches from the glass. That same blank expression. No rage, no effort, just purpose. His eyes were locked on the side of my head. With a jerk, he pulled himself higher. His other hand, the one holding the hatchet, came up. He reared back and slammed the blunt pole of the hatchet into my window. A spiderweb of cracks exploded across the safety glass. He was going to get in. He was going to get in, and he was going to kill us. I slammed the brakes, not hard enough to skid, but enough to jolt the car. His body slid forward with the momentum. At the same time, I veered sharply toward the guardrail on the right side of the road. There was a horrible scraping, grinding sound as his body was sandwiched between my car and the metal rail for a fraction of a second. I felt the impact through the steering wheel. His grip broke. I saw him let go, a dark shape tumbling in my side mirror, rolling into the ditch behind us. I didn't stop. I just drove. My hands were glued to the wheel. Chloe was sobbing, curled into a ball in her seat. We didn't speak the rest of the way home. When we got to the apartment, we inspected the damage. Deep, raw scratches along the driver's side door and roof. The window was an opaque web of cracks, but it held. The worst was the passenger side rear door, a vicious, deep dent where the initial hatchet blow had landed. If Chloe had been sitting back there, I couldn't finish the thought. I said we had to call the police. Chloe went cold. Are you insane? We've been drinking. It's our word against whatever that was. They'll say we hit a deer and panicked. Or worse, they'll think we did something. We left the scene. She was always like that. In a crisis, her first instinct was to calculate the threat to herself, to find the exit. She could make the most irrational self-preservation sound like the only logical choice. We didn't call. I got the window replaced and hammered out the worst of the dent a week later. I told the body shop guy I hit a fallen branch. He didn't ask questions. For months, I scanned local news, police blotters, missing persons reports. Nothing. No body found on that road. No reports of a hatchet-wielding maniac. It was like the night swallowed him whole. The silence was worse than finding a headline. The thing that finally broke Chloe and me wasn't that night, not directly, but it was like a die pack went off in our relationship. A week later, she wanted to go to a party. I couldn't leave the couch. I was jumpy, paranoid. She told me I was letting it define me, that I needed to shake it off. I looked at her, this person I thought I loved, and all I could see was her cold, practical eyes in the car, telling me to drive away from a man we might have just killed. Someone who might have been sick, or lost, or something. Her ability to compartmentalize that horror felt like a moral deformity. We drifted apart soon after. I still drive that road sometimes. I slow down at that stretch. I look at the guardrail, searching for a scar, a streak of paint from my car, anything. There's nothing. Just trees and frost and silence. I don't know if I killed a man that night. I don't know if he was ever really there, though the marks on my car say he was. All I know is that for a few minutes, on a dark, frozen road, something looked at me with absolute void in its eyes and tried to erase me from the world. And the person beside me, the one who was supposed to be my partner, just wanted to forget it ever happened. Sometimes, I think the forgetting is the scariest part of all.
So, I'm using a voice memo app because, honestly, I need to get this out, but writing it feels too formal, too permanent, and my hands are kind of shaky. This started 2 years ago, almost to the day, Valentine's Day. It's why I'm thinking about it now. I went to UCLA. That's where I met Leo. His full name is Leandro, but he introduced himself as Leo on day 1 in our Econ 101 lecture, and it stuck. He's from Buenos Aires. Brilliant guy. One of those people who makes you feel smarter just by being around him. After graduation, life scattered us. I took a job in Chicago. He went back to Argentina to a fintech startup in Buenos Aires. We're both in our late 20s now, doing all right, both stubbornly single. We make a point to meet up, usually once a year, either him flying up to the States or me heading down south. It's a privilege, I know. The thing you need to know for this is the time difference. Buenos Aires is only 2 hours ahead of Chicago. Not a big deal usually, but on this particular night, it became the center of everything. This was 2 Valentine's Days ago. I was in Chicago, and frankly, I was over the whole forced romance thing. My friend Casey convinced me to go to this anti-Valentine's party at a speakeasy-style bar in Wicker Park. It was ironically festive, lots of black and red, sad love songs played at high tempo. I was there with Casey and her boyfriend, mostly people watching. Around 10:30 p.m., I went to the bar to get another drink, and that's when I saw her. She was alone, leaning against the far end of the bar, watching the crowd with this amused, detached smile. She looked intriguing, not trying to be seen, but impossible to miss. I don't know what came over me. I'm not usually that bold, but I walked over, introduced myself. Her name was Alara. Like the moon of Jupiter, she said when I asked, a little smile playing on her lips. We talked, effortlessly, for over an hour. She had this magnetic calmness, a way of listening that made you feel like you were the only person in the room. I learned she was a documentary filmmaker, originally from Portland. She'd spent a year living on a sailboat in the Mediterranean. She had a scar on her left wrist from a climbing accident in Patagonia. Her favorite novel was Station 11. She hated cilantro with a passion she found amusing. These tiny, specific details. The chemistry was undeniable. When the bar started closing, she asked, simply, "Can I see your place?" We took an Uber back to my apartment in Logan Square. I'll spare the intimate details, but it was significant. Not just a hookup. It felt layered, real. We talked more afterward, wrapped in my sheets. She told me about her brother, Felix, who was a marine biologist in Alaska. She showed me a photo on her phone of a stray dog she'd adopted in Greece, named Argos. The battery on her phone died after that. At some point, she said her dress smelled like stale beer and cigarette smoke from the bar. I offered to throw it in the wash. She borrowed one of my old college sweatshirts. We fell asleep maybe around 3 a.m. I woke up to sunlight and an empty space beside me. My first thought was a mild disappointment, then a shrug. It happens. Maybe she had an early meeting, didn't want the morning after awkwardness. All good. Then I got up, and the logic of my apartment fell apart. My front door has a deadbolt. You need a key to lock it from the outside. It was still deadbolted from the inside. I stared at it. To leave, she would have had to open the door, step into the hallway, close it, and then somehow reach through the solid wood to twist the interior deadbolt. Impossible. A cold prickle started at the base of my spine. My apartment is a one-bedroom. No fire escape. The windows are the modern, sealed kind that only tilt open a few inches for ventilation. I checked the bathroom, the closet, under the bed, like a character in a bad horror movie. Nothing. Her dress was gone from the washing machine. My UCLA sweatshirt was gone. Proof she'd been here, but no way out. I spent the morning in a quiet panic, replaying every detail about her, terrified I'd forget them. Elara, documentary filmmaker, Portland, sailboat, scar. Station 11. Felix the marine biologist. Argos the dog. Cilantro. Later that afternoon, unsettled and restless, I had a sudden, overwhelming urge to call Leo. It wasn't planned. It was a compulsion. We hadn't spoken in a few weeks. We did the usual catch-up. Work, family, the unbearable summer heat in BA versus the brutal Chicago winter. But his voice had a distracted, hollow quality to it. Finally, I asked if everything was okay. He let out a long sigh. "It's stupid," he said. "I met someone last night. Valentine's. It was amazing. And she just ghosted this morning. No note, no number. I feel like an idiot for being this bothered by it." My blood ran cold. "Leo," I said, my voice tight. "What was her name?" "Elara," he said. The chill turned to ice. I made him describe her. Portland, documentary filmmaker, a year on a sailboat, the scar from Patagonia, Station 11. He mentioned she'd shown him a picture of her dog, Argos, before her phone died. "Does she have a brother named Felix?" I interrupted, my heart hammering. A pause. "Yes. How did you—" We spent the next half hour in a frantic, terrified comparison. Every detail matched, every single one. He even had something I didn't. Photos. He texted me a picture from the bar they'd been at in Palermo. It was her, unmistakably. The same woman who had been in my bed in Chicago. Then we hit the impossible wall. Time. Buenos Aires is 2 hours ahead of Chicago. Leo met Elara at a bar around 11 p.m. on February 14th, Buenos Aires time. I met Elara at a bar around 10:30 p.m. on February 14th, Chicago time. Do you see it? When it was 11 p.m. for Leo in Argentina, it was only 9 p.m. in Chicago. I didn't meet her for another hour and a half. Even if she had left Leo's apartment the second the sun rose, taken a private jet, the fastest possible flight from Buenos Aires to Chicago is still over 10 hours. There is no physical way she could have been in a bar in Chicago 90 minutes after she was in a bar in Buenos Aires. The math isn't just tight, it's a brick wall. It defies physics. And that's ignoring the other questions. How did she find me? How did she know to use the same name, the same intricate backstory? Why us? Leo and I have dissected this 100 times. We've searched for her online. A documentary filmmaker named Elara from Portland yields nothing. No trace of a Felix in marine biology in Alaska. No social media. It's like she was constructed for that one night and then deleted. The most haunting part isn't the impossibility. It's the profound sense of realness, the feel of her skin, the sound of her laugh,
the specific mundane details you don't invent, the weight of her asleep next to me, and the absolute locked room mystery of her disappearance. Was she some kind of shared hallucination? A temporal glitch? Something that exists in the liminal space between time zones? We have no answers. Only this shared, unshakable experience that bonds us in a way nothing else ever could. Valentine's Day is here again. The ads are everywhere, and I find myself not looking at women in bars, but staring at the space between clock hands, wondering if somewhere in a different city, in a different slice of time, she's introducing herself again, with the same scar, the same dog's name, the same smile, waiting for the next lonely person 2 hours behind to feel that inexplicable urge to pick up the phone and discover they are not, in fact, alone in remembering her.
This is my father's story. He's told it a few times, always late at night when the fire's low and the wind is right. Or wrong, depending on how you see it. Before my sister and I came along, my parents had a kind of freedom that feels mythical now. Dad had sold his first tech startup in his late 20s, and with that sudden, quiet money, they bought time. They were both passionate fly fishers, and the best streams were out west. So over a few years, they ended up buying not one, but 2 small rustic cabins in Montana. Not as investments, but as portals to a quieter life. The first was outside of Darby, in the Bitterroot Valley. They bought it from an old rancher named Mr. Gray. The cabin had these weathered, silver-gray timber walls, and Dad always called it the Gray Place. Partly for the wood, partly for the old man's name. They'd rent it out to friends for stretches, a kind of shared secret to help with the property taxes. They held on to it for a handful of years before trading up. The second cabin was their favorite. It was deeper into the wilderness, nestled in a valley between the Pintler and Anaconda ranges, right along the edge of a chain of alpine lakes. Dad's best friend from Stanford, a guy named James, and his wife Elena went in on it with them. James and Dad were like brothers. The 4 of them would disappear there for weeks at a time, hiking, fishing, living in worn-out flannel and dusty boots. This happened one 4th of July weekend. I don't know the exact year, but it was the late 90s, before the world got so connected. Elena and my mom were back in California for a baby shower. So Dad and James decided to do a guy's weekend at the cabin to fish and drink cheap beer. It was the night of July 3rd. They were up in the loft, a cozy space with a steeply sloped ceiling and a massive west-facing window that looked out over the largest of the lakes, a deep, still sheet of water called Mirror Lake. They had the windows open, listening to the loons call and a cassette of old blues music. A bottle of bourbon sat between them. Dad said it was one of those perfect, silent mountain nights where the air is so clean it feels like a physical presence. Then, everything changed. They were in the middle of a story when a deep, resonant boom rolled across the lake. Not a crack of thunder. This was lower, heavier, like a giant striking the earth with a fist. The cabin windows rattled in their frames. The sound seemed to come from the far side of the lake, where the mountains rose in a sheer, dark wall of pine and rock. James stood up and went to the window. "What in God's name was that?" he muttered. "Avalanche. Too late in the season." Dad joined him. They peered into the darkness. The moon was nearly full, casting a ghostly silver light over the frozen-looking water and the black silhouette of the opposite shore. There were no roads over there, no trails, just 1,000 acres of designated wilderness. After a minute, James pointed. "There, you see that?" Dad squinted. At first, he saw nothing. Then, a flicker of movement, a small, dark shape detaching itself from the tree line at the water's edge. It was moving onto the rocky shore. "An animal?" Dad said. "A bear, maybe, or an elk." "It's on 2 legs," James whispered. They watched, the bourbon forgotten. The figure was small, too small for a man. It staggered, then stopped, seeming to look out across the water toward the cabin. Then, a sound carried over the still lake. Not a loon's cry, a human sound. A high, thin wail of pure terror. The voice of a child. "Help, please!" Dad said the sound pierced the peaceful night like a shard of glass. It was unmistakable. A kid, alone, on the wild side of the lake, in the middle of the night. They didn't hesitate. They thundered down the loft stairs, grabbing jackets and the big flashlight from the hook by the door. They burst out onto the deck, the beam of the light cutting a wobbly path across the dark water. The cry came again, weaker now. "Help me!" They ran down the worn path to the lake's edge. The shoreline was all jagged rock and fallen timber. They started picking their way along it, the flashlight beam jumping wildly. The plan was to skirt the lake's perimeter, but it was slow, treacherous going. Then came the second boom. This one was different. It wasn't just sound. It was accompanied by a pulse of light that didn't illuminate the sky, but seemed to emanate from the ground itself on the far shore. A deep, bruised purple flash that lit the undersides of the trees for a split second. It was utterly silent after the initial thump. When their eyes adjusted from the flash, the crying had stopped. The silence was worse. James shone the light across the water. The beam couldn't reach the far shore, but it danced over the inky surface. Nothing. "We have to get over there," James said, his voice tight. "The canoe," Dad said. It was a mad idea. The lake was deep and cold, even in July, but the thought of that voice. They dragged the old aluminum canoe from its rack and into the water. They paddled in silence, the only sound the dip of their paddles and the frantic beating of their own hearts. The moon lit their way. As they neared the center of the lake, James suddenly stopped paddling. "Look," he said, pointing not across the lake, but back the way they'd come. Dad turned. The cabin, a dark shape against the starry sky, had a single square of light, the loft window, and in that window, clearly silhouetted by the lamp they'd left on, was the small, distinct shape of a child looking out at them. A cold deeper than the lake water seized Dad's chest. They'd locked the door. They were the only ones for miles. They spun the canoe around, paddling back toward their own dock with a frantic, slapping haste. They beached the canoe and ran, stumbling up the path to the cabin. The door was still locked. They let themselves in, breathing hard. The cabin was empty. They searched every room, under beds, in closets. Nothing. The loft was just as they'd left it. 2 half-full glasses of bourbon, the cassette player humming softly. They didn't sleep. They sat at the rough-hewn kitchen table with the lights on. A shotgun laid across it, though Dad said he had no idea what he would shoot. They didn't speak much. The joy of the weekend had been utterly incinerated. Just before dawn, as the sky began to lighten to a dull gray, they heard it, not a cry for help. This time, it was the soft, clear sound of a child's laughter. It seemed to come from right outside the front door. Then, a moment later, from the woodpile around the side of the cabin. Then, faintly, from the direction of the lake. It circled them until the sun finally rose, bleaching the night and its horrors away. They packed up and left that morning. Dad said the drive back to civilization was made in near total silence. They never told Mom or Elena, not for many years. They sold their share of the cabin to James and Elena a year later. Dad said he just couldn't look at that view again. I asked him about it once, when I was older. "What do you think it was, Dad? A lost hiker? Some kind of echo?" He was quiet for a long time, staring out the window of our much safer suburban home. "The sound, maybe. An odd atmospheric thing. The figure. A trick of the light and fear," he said slowly. Then he met my eyes. "But the laughter, son. The laughter that moved. And that light. That wasn't from any storm. It came from under the trees." He shook his head.
James and we don't talk about it anymore. Some questions, if you're smart, you just stop asking. He never went back to that valley, and whenever I hear loons calling on a lake, I don't think of peace. I think of that desperate, tiny voice carrying across cold, dark water, and the thing that might have been mimicking it from the darkened window of a lonely cabin.